what you see in the Singapore data is that that rate of improvement can also be brought about at the same time as narrowing achievement gaps between different ethnic groups. And here you see how over a 25-year period or so, 30-year period, the Malay and Indian populations in Singapore have really narrowed the achievement gap with the Chinese population. So really significant improvement. And indeed, as a system gets better, the only way to get continuous improvement is to keep narrowing achievement gaps. The second lesson is that the combination of policies you need to move on changes as the system improves. In other words, if you're a system, for example, I'm working with the Punjab, 100 million people province of Pakistan. The policies that will work there are not the policies that are working currently in Hong Kong or Singapore. It's a different set of policies because it's at a different stage of that improvement journey. So what we did in the sample was take the 20-odd systems and share them out in, according to the data we had on a single scale. And we looked at the journey that takes a system from poor to fair, another one from fair to good, another from good to great, and then finally the challenge for Hong Kong, the great to excellent improvement. Let me just describe a couple of those journeys. What you see over time is that it's more and more important to focus on the quality of the teachers as professionals. It becomes absolutely central to that. Is that buzzing noise? It's not a fire alarm, is it? So at the beginning, it's all about getting the basics in place. Everybody knows that was the case in, for example, if you look at the first stage of the Singapore improvement journey from 1965, making sure everybody masters the basics of literacy and numeracy, and then so on. Let me just give you two examples. So in the poor to fair journey, Minas Gerais in Brazil is a very good example. It went from being the 5th best province to the best province in Brazil in a 3 or 4 year period. Very, very significant improvement. How did it do that? It did it by providing really effective scaffolding and motivation for low-skilled teachers and principals, scripted lessons, making sure the children were focused and on task, making sure the children got into school, stayed in school, and had their basic needs fulfilled. Really good school visits by the centre to check that things were happening, incentives for high performance, making sure there was a proper quality standard to improve all the schools. So very systematic, very clear accountability, very good use of targets and assessments, and making sure, of course, that all the students arrived in school and spent the day focused on lessons. And that made an enormous difference. So at the basic stage, that's what makes the difference in the poor to fair journey. But when you get to a higher level of performance, like, for example, Long Beach in California, a relatively small but vastly improved school system in California, and here again you see its improvement over a period of years. What works there is totally different. Once you get to the good to great journey, now it's all about the quality of the people who join the profession. Which people are you recruiting as teachers? Which people from among those teachers are you recruiting as principals? How do you prepare them? How do you induct them into the profession? How do you ensure that they join a profession that not just from the system outwards, but the profession itself demands high standards laterally from all the colleagues? So raising the caliber of entering teachers and principals becomes fundamental. But even if you do that, it's not enough, because in any given year, there's only say 5 or 10 or 15% at the most of the teachers are new entering a system. So the second thing you've got to do is work on improving the quality of the teachers and principals you already have. There's data in the US, for example, from some time back, about 10 years ago now, that many teachers in the US improve for the first 3 years they're teachers, but then for the remaining 37 years of their career, they don't improve at all. What kind of career is that? What these systems are doing, and you see it very visibly in Long Beach, but also in many of the high-performing systems represented in this room, Korea and Singapore and Hong Kong, of course, that teachers, once they're teaching, they continue to get better. They learn from their colleagues. They watch lessons. They see each other teach. They plan together. They collaborate. And through that collaboration and comparing student work and looking at the data, you get continuous improvement. Also, as systems improve, there's growing school-based decision-making, giving schools more responsibility to shape their own future. Because now you've got high-caliber school leaders, high-caliber teachers, more responsibility can be devolved to them. And what you see over time through these journeys is the changing balance of capability building and accountability. Both are important at all stages, so both matter. It's not a question of one or the other, it's a question of the right combination. But increasingly, as systems improve, it's the investment in capability building, in strengthening each teacher's capacity to teach that makes the difference. And that capacity is not just each individual teacher being good, it's the collective capacities of the teachers in a school and across a system. So accountability remains important, but capability building becomes ever more important as systems improve. This slide simply reinforces that point. And here are some examples of systems that are very good, including Hong Kong represented there, at encouraging those professional learning communities, the teachers visiting each other's classrooms on a regular basis and learning from each other in systematic ways, doing demonstration lessons, mentoring and coaching, building networks around subject groups, and reviewing student performance data, and then jointly developing solutions. Third lesson is a reinforcement of that. Often in the political debate about education, the debate is about structure, and here you've had this big reform to 3+3+4 of structure. It's a debate about resource, but actually what really drives improvement, it's not to say that structure and resource don't drive improvement, but the thing that makes the difference ultimately is whether you're changing teacher behavior, whether teachers are continuously improving at what they do. And here are just some examples of that. Michael Fullen's written a recent paper called The Right Drivers, and this is just drawing out those lessons from this. And Michael puts up some dichotomies. The four of them are represented here. What he says is both of these things matter. So the blue matters and the yellow things matter. Both of them matter, but it's getting the right combination of them. And what he says in relation to the dialogue between the system and the teaching profession and the people in the system is you need to lead with the yellow ones, but keep the blue ones in place. So as you take your reform forward, investing in capability building needs to be the major. Of course, accountability matters, and the data in the McKinsey study would show that. Similarly, investing in individual capability building isn't enough. You've got to build the capability, the collective capacity, to use Michael's phrase, the teamwork of a group of teachers in the school and indeed across a system. Similarly, you very often hear of governments leading a reform with technology. We're going to provide a laptop for every child or more investment in computing. But leading with technology doesn't change things. It's leading with the change in pedagogy, in the way people teach, that transforms things, and then the technology coming in behind that to support it. And then finally, thinking in system terms as opposed to a series of piecemeal initiatives. And Hong Kong, actually, over the last 10 years is a really good example of whole system reform rather than piecemeal reform. And then there's a question about context. One of the things we wanted to tease out was, is it to do with culture and context and the political system in a country? And the answer is, it is up to a point. But actually, and here are just a few examples, you can choose, you can choose how you do things, but what you do is pretty common. So data matters. Every great and improving system knows that data matters, but how you use data might vary. So Singapore really doesn't like targets. The US and in the past, the UK and other countries have used targets. Both can work, but what matters, the underlying thing is good use of data to drive performance at school and system level, and so on through the other examples. And one of the decisions you have to make as a system leader is whether to persuade or mandate change. And these are the dilemmas that people face. If you want to do things rapidly, mandating is more likely to work. If you want to do it more gradually, you might want to use persuasion. If the change is non-negotiable, you might want to mandate it, On the other hand, if it's a question of flexibility, you might want to persuade. And what you see is systems making choices between mandating and persuading, and usually some combination of the two is necessary. The final lesson I want to emphasize before I finish is leadership continuity is really important. What we found in our study was that the strategic leaders, these are the technical people like a permanent secretary or a top official or Michael Fullan offering advice to the Premier of Ontario. The people who are strategic leaders in our sample stayed on the whole 6 years, whereas a US urban superintendent, the average tenure is 2.8 years. If you look at the median of the political leaders in our systems, it was 7 years. But take an education secretary in England, I've known the last 12. That covers a period of just 24 years. So if you're changing political leaders that often, it makes it hard to get sustained reform. You can do it if you've got a guiding group around the system that keeps keeps continuity going, but it makes it a lot harder to do that. And I'm sure everybody in England hopes that the current secretary will breach that average and stay longer, because there's a big reform going through at the moment. So this challenge is really an important thing to get right. And if there is going to be turnover, then you need something else that brings the continuity. So for example, in Ontario, they have actually had 4 education secretaries over the last 7.5 years. But because the Premier is so focused on education, the continuity has been maintained. There are 9 lessons in the report. I won't go through all of them. If I summarized it in 4 words, the summary is: you can mandate adequacy, but you have to unleash greatness. You can't even, the English language won't let you say, I'm mandating greatness. It's an impossible concept. You can mandate adequacy, but if you want to be great, and you aspire to be great, as you do in Hong Kong, then that has to be unleashed. And just to conclude, I want to say these things. There are many challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. There are many opportunities as well. Whether we are able to seize those opportunities depends on a range of factors, but undoubtedly education is absolutely fundamental to that. We heard the chief executive say that education was the biggest part of Hong Kong's budget. That is one example among many you could give of the primacy of education in all of us being able to rise to the challenges of the 21st century. It's also true that all of us around the world benefit from everybody else's system improving. It's not a zero-sum game where if one system improves, somebody else must do less well. Everybody benefits if somebody else's education system improves. It's a game not of zero-sum, but of constant improvement. The global economy, the state of the world will benefit from improved education wherever it happens. And so the learning that is increasingly happening between systems, across systems, in events like this is absolutely fundamental. And I believe, going back to Hong Kong and finishing where I began, that the reform that you've been putting in place thoughtfully, profoundly, and systematically over the last decade, and is now finally beginning to change your schools, will be something that everybody around the world will want to watch. I believe that you, the teachers of Hong Kong, will be a beacon to the world, and it's a real pleasure to be among you. Thank you very much.